back to another hobby cheating video. So today we're going to talk about doing very bright red. And red, I often hear red labeled as a problem color, and that's really funny to me. Red is actually, I think, one of the easiest colors to do. The key with red is just don't do it over straight black. I assume the reason people think red is a problem color is because it's a very translucent color. Hence, if you just black prime things and then try to lay red over it, it's still going to show through a lot of that black. The answer to doing red, just any red, is simply prime in a different color. Use like a medium tone brown for your prime, or use zenithal style highlighting like I showed you in the previous video, and red will be a snap. One quick layer and you're done. And so, but what we're going to talk about today is getting really bright red really easily. Okay, so I've prepped up a miniature to do this. And let me walk you through what I did here. So this is Karnak, our little three-headed dog friend. And I went ahead and gave him some zenithal highlighting like I did with the ghost. And then I just sprayed him in red, kind of all over. So you can see kind of there's some variation in the tone. It's going to be tough to tell because then what I did next is I dry brushed an ivory color. And actually what I used for this was quite literally Ivory, the Leo model color Ivory, over the red. And that's the key. You want to use a warm white. So when I say a warm whites are bone, sand, ivory, anything that has a hint of yellow or brown in it makes it a warm white. And the reason we want to do that is because if you think of those colors, yellow, brown, all of those are also contained within red. So in general, you can just highlight up red. It's actually rather easy. Red's one of the easiest colors to layer. Takes very little practice or anything like that with red. You just kind of can go, if you have a mid-tone brown, you lay some red over it, you slowly climb your way up through sort of the cycle of reds, and what you'll eventually come to is, a fairly highlighted red. But who's got the time, right? So what we're going to talk about today is how you can get a very bright red effect. One of the problems with doing that if you go over brown is the red is always going to look dark because brown is your lowest tone. So no matter what you do, you're always going to have deep red in there. And let's say you don't want that. Let's say you're going for like an old school Blood Angel style red, or you really want your red demons to pop up in the orange, but you don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time layering, or you just want a really bright red effect. Well, here we go. So, in this case, I dry brushed white over him, and that's because Karnak has all these wonderful scales, and you can really see them here very clearly. He's got these incredibly deep ridges. This is the old metal one, as you can see, because I dropped him, and he weighs like 80 pounds. And so as a result, dry brushing was the right choice here. Now, normally if I was dealing with a smooth surface, so I did my juggernauts in the same way, and I wanted to add smooth armor plates, then I just did a light red, or a light white glaze over them. It will look horrible in this step, okay? That looks like crap. And that's exactly where we want it. Because remember, you've got to make a fig look bad before you make a fig look good. So, we've got our white on here. What's our next step? Alright, well, I'm going to attach him down to my base here. There we go. So now we can actually paint on him without touching him. And we'll do the rest on here. And then we're going to take, I'm going to take a fairly bright, but very orangey red here. This is Vallejo Game Air Bloody Red. There's lots of different options out here. So if you use model color, Scarlet is probably fairly close. That's a little more orange, but something in that tone, okay? Something in the red-orange tone. So I'm going to take this, and we're going to go ahead and put some in our palette here. Not a whole lot, because you don't need a whole lot. Just a couple drops, because we're going to turn this into a glaze. So how are we going to do that? Well, if we remember, we're going to use our old friends, the glaze and thinner medium that I talked about in the previous videos. These two bottles are running low because I use them so often. So we're going to put in, I don't know, let's say 4 drops of glaze medium. It's more like cooking than baking. You just kind of, whereas it's not exact recipes. We'll put in a single drop of the thinner medium. You'll notice that with a thinner, you see how thick that looks in there? Like how you can still see it very consistent? That's what thinner medium does. It holds the paint together. So glazed medium is much more like your Lamia medium. Thinner is a very thick medium, and it helps keep your paint color together. That's why I like to use both. And then our final step is we're going to take some water, and we're going to put in several drops of water. Again, using our handy dandy 99-cent medicine droppers. Very high tech. All right, next up we take our little paint stirrer. We remember this from the first video. We're just going to stir that up, because why hurt a brush doing this? We're just going to stir it up. Little darling, stir it up. And we're going to get this down to a nice thin glaze. Now, how do we tell if we've got it thin enough? It's funny how orange that looks on camera where the light's hitting it. It's really interesting because from my angle I can't see this yellow unless I look up on the camera. But it's a good example of just how much the light reflects this and how bright this should look. At any rate, you can see when I drag it up the side here how thin it is. Okay, like it's not coming up with me, it runs down. The other easy test is take the back of your thumb. You can see I have some paint on there from earlier. And let's just run some of that across there. See how thin that is on my finger? That's what we want. Okay? This very liquidy glaze. Okay. So now we're going to take a brush. We're going to wet that brush, of course, because we only put wet brushes in water, or into paint, I'm sorry. We never put a wet brush, or we never put a dry brush, unless we're actually dry brushing, into our paint. So we're going to just dab that in there. Again, we're going to get most of that off. We're going to clean a little off on the back of our thumb because we don't need a lot here. And then what we're going to do is just run over the miniature. Okay? And I'm just going to go over. We don't need to be too careful here, honestly, because he's already been washed. I'm sorry, I should have also stated that he was washed with like a Carienberg Crimson in there to pick out the lower points. Okay? So we're just going to kind of give that a wash with this glaze. It's kind of a little of both. We don't want to let a lot of paint run down in the recesses, but if a little doesn't really hurt anything. It's so thin, it can't really tint that darker color. We've taken this paint down to a level where it can now only affect the white. And that's funny, on the camera, it doesn't really look like it's doing much, but I assure you, it is turning the color. Let's see if we switch it around. There you go. Now you can see the difference. So this side we've touched with the glaze, this side we haven't. That makes it very obvious. So let's keep going. Okay, so we're just going to keep giving him some coverage here on all the areas we want to turn this color. And so basically you'll notice already that we've got a very bright red. Alright? But it still looks very white, and that's okay. That's what we want. We want it to look very white. Flip him around. We're going to get his heads here. He has a lot of them. That's his thing. I'm not going to be incredibly picky here about all this. I'd probably take a little more time if I was doing this off camera, but I really don't want to bore you, and I don't need to get the miniature perfect to give you the idea. We just need to get enough. Okay, one of the advantages to working in nice thin glazes like this is that they dry very fast. These dry on the miniature very quick. You're putting on very little paint. It's going to be dry extremely fast. Okay? So, now, what have we done? Well, we've turned him pink. Right? Like I don't suppose that it kind of still looks white on camera. But we've turned him pink in reality. Alright. This is going to be a tough one to show because oranges and things like that never show up well on camera. I wonder if I move him over the green if that looks better. Okay. So, that looks so much whiter. But at any rate, we've tinted it just a little. And that's what we wanted. We just want to get a nice tint there. So then we're going to let that dry for a moment. It's not going to take long. In honesty, we can kind of be prepping up our next step. Our next step is we're going to take an orange tone. And honestly, you could go directly to here if you want to just jump it straight over here. But we're going to take an orange tone, and we're going to do the same thing. Only this time, we're not going to thin it quite as much. We're still going to make a glaze out of it, but not quite as much. Because when you get to more orange and yellow colors, these paints are naturally very thin. And so that's the reason of putting white under your oranges. And really, that's the secret to painting orange or yellow in general. Even if you're not trying to highlight red, let's just say you're trying to do orange on a miniature, or you want to have orange highlighted up into yellow or something, you know, and that's your only goal. Just make sure you paint white under it first. That's it. Like, and if that sounds like, oh, I don't want to paint an extra step, well, my question is, what would you rather do? Paint one nice solid coat of, you know, an off-white that's got good coverage, or would you rather sit there and layer 32 layers of orange on to try to get to something right and have your paint be all thick and gross? Really not much of a choice when it goes like that, is there? Sorry, my brush had a little buildup on it there. Okay. So, again, we're going to do our old back of the thumb test on our orange. Nice and thin, and you can see actually I had some white paint, and when I cover it up, it turns yellow. So, let's bring Karnak back in here. He should be nice and dry by this point. We're going to take our orange, we're going to wipe off most of it, and then we're just going to go over that. And now you can see what happens is we get him, those scales tint immediately. Now where we've recessed it and we have darker parts in the crevices or on the red, nothing's happening. Color doesn't change, right? I still have my dark red, you can see in between the cracks. Still have my same dark red ready to go. So then I'm just going to keep doing that. As you can see, this is not a very time-consuming process, nor do I have to have an incredible amount of brush control. I'm not really using the best brush here because I'm just dragging it across this fig. I'm touching it lightly because I only want to hit the raised areas on this guy, on his little scales. I don't need to get a lot of paint down in the mix. That would actually be counter to what we're aiming at, right? So I just want to kind of touch the high points here. So we're not dry brushing, certainly not, because you know we have plenty of paint on here and it's very, very wet. Instead, we're just doing it through this glaze. And you might say to me, Vince, why wouldn't I just dry brush this? Why wouldn't I just dry brush some orange, some thick orange? And I'd say, that's a good question, Internet. And the answer is because you don't want your mini to look bad. Okay, it's that simple. If you dry brush across these scales with that orange, one, it's not going to get good coverage. If you do it thick enough to give yourself good coverage, it's going to look bad. Because you're going to get drag marks, it's going to have, it's just not going to look right. This glaze afterward is what is going to bring the white dry brush we did back into line. It gets rid of those, sorry, I'm off camera there. It gets rid of those drag marks, it gets rid of the bad sort of chalky element that comes along with dry brushing. Smooths it all out, keeps your color nice and bright, and there we go. Just that quick. Now, what we've done here is, let's see, we can turn him around, and you can see now this guy is very, very bright. On camera, he looks like super bright. He isn't quite that bright in reality, but this is the fun of trying to shoot anything red on camera. Now, we could stop there if we want him to be that color. If you want to have that heavy of a contrast, no issue. You're good to go. You're done. Just that quick. We've done a very bright, solid orange color with no issue. If you wanted this to be even brighter, I could have taken it directly over the white. I could have cut out the red-orange glaze step. And what that would have done is just, this would have gotten super bright because the orange plus the white would have made this basically yellow, right? And just like that, we can make our miniature have this extremely bright orange in a very quick and simple fashion. Again, did not take me long. I got a good, solid, clean, bright orange color all on these scales. Now, if I didn't want it to be quite so bright, if I just wanted it to be orange-hued, I could have either not gone to the orange, could have done a second layer of red, I could do another glaze of red over top of this. All of those are perfectly fair and fine options. It's really just at this point then a matter of personal taste, right? And where you think your miniature needs to go. But for me, I'll probably put on a little more red, take it over, even out these colors, just to kind of get everything more in line. But again, we're talking 1 or 2 more coats, another 1 or 2 minutes on this miniature for me to do it. As you saw, we didn't need to be careful. We didn't need to have a lot of brush control. We just needed to thin our paint down to the right consistency, have the right undershading, and boom, we got this nice yellow-orange color we wanted for these very, very bright scales. All right, so sum up. If you're going to paint orange, yellow, or you want a very bright red, the key is undershading it in that white. You can do this on flat surfaces through just a sort of thinner glaze. Make sure you, I should say a thinner layer, because you don't want to take it down to a glaze paint to build up that white. Do it through just a thinner layer of white put straight over your red, just as I did here with the dry brush. If you've got a nice rough surface, let's say you wanted to do this on hair, and this is a great effect to do on like red hair that you want orange or something in. You can dry brush on a little white, then just run this red or orange glaze over it, and you get these beautiful explosions of color in that red hair. Also a very fun thing to do. So, undershade, thin glaze of a red-orange or an orange, mix back and forth. You're just dragging it around. Don't let too much paint build up in the recesses, but you don't have to worry about it too much as long as you've darkened your recesses previously through a wash or something similar. Okay? So I hope this helps. Again, hobby cheating is all about achieving good effects, quick and simple, and so there we go. Nice, quick, easy, bright orange or yellow. I'll throw a picture of him here at the end so you can see him and what he looks like. But thank you very much for watching as always, and we'll see you next time.